For decades, Donald Trump carefully built not just a business empire, but an image. Gold-plated towers, luxury hotels, private jets, and his name stamped boldly across skylines became symbols of wealth, dominance, and success. To millions, Trump wasn't just a surname. It was a brand meant to represent power and prosperity. Okay? But empires built on image are often the most fragile. The story begins long before any courtroom ruling. Trump's rise in real estate was fueled by aggressive branding, bold claims, and the constant projection of confidence. His properties were marketed as premium, elite, and immensely valuable. The numbers attached to them, worth billions, according to Trump himself, became a core part of his public persona. Yet behind closed doors, questions had been quietly growing. Investigators and regulators began noticing a pattern. The same properties were often described very differently depending on the situation. When seeking loans, values appeared inflated. When dealing with taxes, those same assets suddenly seemed far less valuable. For years, this discrepancy raised eyebrows. But it remained buried under layers of legal complexity and political noise. Until it didn't. When the case finally reached court, it wasn't about politics. It wasn't about elections. It wasn't even about Trump's speeches or supporters. It was about numbers, documents, and sworn statements. Cold, unfeeling paperwork. The judge's ruling sent shockwaves through both the business and political worlds. In a historic decision, the court found that Trump and his business entities had repeatedly misrepresented asset values. The conclusion was clear. This was not a one-time mistake or a misunderstanding. It was a consistent pattern, and patterns have consequences. The ruling authorized the seizure of iconic Trump assets, properties that had defined his empire for decades. Suddenly, buildings that once symbolized dominance became legal liabilities. The idea that these marquee properties could be taken out of Trump's control marked a turning point few had imagined. What made this moment especially powerful was its symbolism. Trump had always portrayed himself as untouchable. Lawsuits came and went. Scandals rose and faded. But this time, the threat wasn't to his reputation alone, was to the physical foundation of his empire. This wasn't just about money. Real estate is power. Control over assets means leverage, influence, and credibility. Losing them doesn't just shrink a balance sheet, shakes the entire structure that depends on it. Supporters called the ruling unfair. Critics called it overdue. But the court focused on one thing only: evidence. And according to the ruling, the evidence was overwhelming. As news spread, markets reacted, analysts debated, and media outlets scrambled to assess what this meant for Trump's future. Was this the beginning of a total collapse? Or merely a severe blow he could survive? One thing was certain: the myth of invincibility had cracked. For the first time, Trump's empire wasn't under threat from political rivals or public opinion, but from the legal system itself. And once the law turns its full attention to an empire, history shows that nothing is guaranteed. When a judge orders the seizure of high-profile assets, the impact goes far beyond the courtroom. This isn't just a legal headline, it's a structural shock to an entire empire. To understand why this ruling matters, we need to look at how empires actually function. Large business empires don't survive on cash alone. They rely on trust. Banks trust valuations. Partners trust disclosures. Investors trust that numbers reflect reality. When a court rules that those numbers were systematically manipulated, that trust evaporates almost instantly. And without trust, empires begin to unravel. The seized assets weren't random properties. They were cornerstone holdings assets that supported loans, guaranteed deals, and reinforced Trump's image as a billionaire tycoon. Losing control over them threatens liquidity, refinancing options, and future negotiations. Even worse, the ruling creates precedent. Other lenders may now re-examine past deals. Other regulators may ask new questions. And other courts may view future Trump-related cases through a much harsher lens. One ruling has the power to trigger a chain reaction. This is where the real danger lies. Trump's brand has always been his greatest weapon. It turned real estate into entertainment and business into spectacle. But branding only works when it's believable. When courts publicly dismantle that credibility, rebuilding it becomes nearly impossible. Yet Trump has survived storms before. Supporters argue that appeals could delay or even reverse parts of the decision. They point out that legal battles often stretch for years, and they're not wrong. This ruling is not the final chapter. But it is a defining one. For the first time, the conversation around Trump has shifted from controversial figure to financial accountability. That shift changes how history will remember this moment. It also sends a broader message. No matter how powerful the name, how large the platform, or how loud the supporters' financial systems still rely on rules. And when those rules are broken consistently, consequences eventually follow. This case has already entered legal textbooks, not because of who Trump is, but because of what it represents: the collision of branding and accountability. Whether Trump's empire can recover remains uncertain. But one thing is undeniable: the era of unquestioned dominance is over. The towers may still stand. The name may still shine. But behind the facade, the foundation has been shaken. And history shows us one brutal truth. Once an empire starts defending itself in court instead of expanding in the world, decline is no longer a possibility, it's a process. If you value deep, unbiased breakdowns of power, history, and hidden realities, like this video, subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Because the most important stories are never just about people, they're about the systems behind them.